The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the guests appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of 8 News Now or Nexstar Media Group.
You won't see my name on the door of any convenience store. You won't see my name on the door of any box store or a bank that says you got to wear a mask.
Tonight on Politics Now, former Senator Dean Heller jumping into the race for governor. We ask about COVID, election rules, and Trump. Plus,
there's 3 sort of unsolvable issues at this point that all of government is approaching.
I think you should open that up to the public, and you should have those meetings in your community so that you can get actual real-time feedback.
So far, 2 men are vying for Clark County Sheriff. We talked to them about their approaches to fighting crime and changes they would make in the departments. And another potential government shutdown looming right now. We explain the process Democrats want to use to avoid it.
From 8 News Now, this is Politics Now.
Former Republican Senator Dean Heller making it official. Good evening. I'm David Charnes in this week for John Langler. Heller announcing his run for the Republican nomination for governor in Carson City Monday. And then we got a chance to talk to him as he stopped here in Las Vegas. Issue number 1, he says, the pandemic and Democratic Governor Steve Sisolak's handling of it.
I have been immunized. My wife has been immunized. My family has been immunized, and I think that's very important. And I'll continue to stress to Nevadans, because I think that's the only way. That's the only way you can combat this virus is to get immunized. That's the answer. If you're immunized, and I am, doesn't mean I'm not going to get COVID, but the chance of getting a bad case of it obviously is diminished pretty substantially. I want to make one thing clear from the offset on this, is that I don't support mandates, and I do not support lockdowns, and will not support them in the future.
Now, to become the Republican Party's nominee, Heller is going to have to bring together all sides of the GOP. So here's what he said about getting President Trump's base on his side.
I think it's going to be just fine. One, I'm the only proven conservative in this race. I think that most conservatives are tired. I think most Nevadans, for that matter, are tired of seeing a 6-year-old child or their children and their grandchildren running around on a soccer field wearing masks. I think they're tired of that. I think conservative values are going to win this race. And when those conservative values deal with crime, deal with abortion, deal with issues, immigration, similar to that, I've got the record for it. I mean, I supported conservative judges when I was in Washington, D.C. I helped pass the American First Act. I even helped write it. I continue to support it. So I think conservative values are going to win this race, and at the end of the day.
Now, another big topic he talked about is the right for women to seek abortion. Heller describing himself as at the get-go on his website as pro-life, and he tells me he'd want to make abortion illegal in Nevada. The Texas law this morning when reporters asked you that's 6 weeks, no exceptions, and that you would like to bring it to the voters here in Nevada to change what's in our Constitution. Right. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, and I probably should clarify. I don't really know everything that was in that law. I like the concept of it, but I know that they're going to have some problems, some issues, and frankly, it's going to be challenged. So let's see where it goes from there. But I want the most conservative pro-life laws enacted in the state of Nevada that the legislature will pass that we can work together on.
And Nevada voters would have to vote on that as well. So if it's in our Constitution that you can get an abortion.
Any changes
correct.
Back from the 1990 law.
Okay. But 6 weeks, rape and incest included is what you're looking at.
Yes.
So it's important to tell you that any changes to abortion access here in Nevada would require a change to our state constitution. And that process includes several votes in the legislature where that would likely never pass right now with the current Democratic majority. And then it would go to a statewide vote as well. Now, I also asked Heller about the past election.
Well, first of all, I know who the President of the United States is today. And the question is how bad was this last election? This last election was a mess. There was a lot of chaos involved in this here in the state of Nevada. And frankly, I think the legislature, when they changed the laws during the last legislative session, made it easier to cheat. if as Secretary of State, I think I know a thing or two about election laws here in the state of Nevada. They watered down voter ID. They took a felony, which was a felony at one point, ballot harvesting, made it what they consider now to be good government, and multiple ballots were delivered to the same residence.
Now, Heller tells me he's not asked for nor has he received the former president's endorsement. Heller said he'd love to see President Trump supporting him. So far, the other Republicans running right now against Dean Heller: Clark County Sheriff Joe Lombardo, North Las Vegas Mayor John Lee, Reno Attorney Joey Gilbert, and financial investor Guy Norhan. Now, Congressman Mark Amodei up north has also said he may jump in, but no, he hasn't done so yet. So, of course, the winner of that race goes on to face Governor Sisolak, a campaign spokesperson for the governor, telling us in a statement, quote, "Republicans have found themselves in a crowded primary they will have to fight through for the next 9 months." She says in the meantime, Governor Sisolak will be focused on Nevada's recovery, getting more shots in arms, Nevadans back to work, and businesses back open and thriving. Meantime, a plan to let a tech company create its own semi-autonomous government took a head-on assault from Story County. The plan is called an innovation zone, and this is a rendering from the company that wants to create them. It's called Blockchain LLC. A bill to create innovation zones turned into a committee to study it, and that committee did meet this week. Story County officials made clear they support plans for the company to develop land, but pushed back on their assertions they would need to create their own government to do that. Now, the committee is supposed to come up with recommendations before the next legislative session.
I spent decades behind a news desk trying to be your voice, and I'll do the same as your Secretary of State.
That is former television journalist Gerard Ramalho announcing his run for Nevada Secretary of State Wednesday. Ramalho says he will run as a Republican, focusing on Nevada's election system and growing business opportunities here. He is up against two Democrats, Cisco Aguilar and former Assemblywoman Ellen Spiegel, and Republican and former Assemblyman Jim Marchant. Well, the next top cop here in the Valley.
The community doesn't really feel connected oftentimes to the police department.
Changing the way we police in that we involve the community and the folks that we do police more so.
Up next, we hear from both men running for Clark County Sheriff about their strategies to get the community more involved in what police are doing. And Alex Limon explaining what the heck budget reconciliation is and how it may keep the government from getting shut down again. Well, so far, two men that served quite a long time in the Metro Police Department have thrown their hats in the ring for Clark County Sheriff. They are former Under Sheriff Kevin McMahill, who just retired in December, and former Assistant Sheriff Tom Roberts, who served in the State Assembly after his career at Metro ended. Now, Lombardo has endorsed McMahill, but also has said some nice things about Roberts so far. John Langler talked to both of them this week. So let's start with Kevin McMahill and his answer to addressing a rise in violent crime.
There's three sort of unsolvable issues at this point that all of government is approaching, right? It's the homeless issue, the addiction issue, and the mental health issue. And you know, today, unfortunately, the Clark County Detention Center remains the largest addiction treatment center in the state of Nevada. It's also the largest mental health facility in the state of Nevada, and we probably house more homeless in the Clark County Detention Center than anywhere else. And so the other challenge that I have to tell you with that is typically one or all three of those things are involved oftentimes in the challenges that our officers have that ultimately end up in an officer-involved shooting. So they're deploying crisis response teams right now as we speak at Metro. That's a licensed clinical social worker along with a paramedic and an EMT that go out to these calls for service. They're handling about 6 of them per day. They're only taking place at the Convention Center Area Command and the Downtown Area Command. We have 11 area commands. I think it's important that we continue to utilize those types of resources to assist us.
Sheriff Lombardo, now running for governor, has already sort of supported you in your campaign to become the sheriff. What of Sheriff Lombardo's term as sheriff and at your own time at Metro would you want to continue, and what do you think needs to be changed in another administration?
Yeah, so I actually have the support of the last three sheriffs, Sheriff Young, Sheriff Gillespie, and of course Sheriff Lombardo. And I think, you know, we've always been very fortunate to have very good sheriffs here. I think that one of the things that I certainly continue on is that Metro has been very exceptional at crime fighting. That's what they want from the community, wants from their police department. They want that safety and security piece of it. One of the things that I can tell you that I bring to the table that that we're going to continue to improve upon, and you know, I think it's a direct result of some of the challenges that all police departments have across this nation of ours, is that the community doesn't really feel connected oftentimes to the police department. And I think that we're better at it than most, but one of the things that I'm really going to focus in on is that sort of authentic community relationship building, so that we can better understand one another in times of crisis, and that we don't have to have the challenges that we've seen in the years past.
Use of force and oversight, that was addressed in the last legislative session. The Attorney General's office being involved now in reviewing use of force. What involvement do you believe on another agency level, on the state level, whatever the case may be, should Metro Police have for use of force?
Well, I think Metro is a model for the use of force piece of it. I had a big hand in creating the current model that exists at Metro, not only from an administrative investigation, which looks at policy, procedure, training, tactics, leadership, supervision of all of the officers involved in that incident, but you know, I welcome that additional scrutiny. I really do, because most people don't know. I know we just had another officer-involved shooting. I believe it was yesterday. That's number 6 for Metro. In 2010, when we had the Department of Justice come in, we had 25. And so Metro is making the right steps, but we still have to find those alternatives to deadly force and continue to train that into our officers.
You're running against Tom Roberts, a man I'm sure you're familiar with. Obviously, he had a long service with Metro Police as well. How would you say you are different than what he might bring to Metro Police?
Listen, I'm not going to sit here and say one bad word to you about Tom Roberts. Tom did an exceptional job while he worked for me as an assistant sheriff. He did everything I ever asked him to do. Tom's a good man. I just believe I'm more qualified than Tom. You know, everything from the Bundy incident to being in charge of 1 October to the COVID response, and then obviously the summer of unrest and rioting that we had. I was out there on the front lines with our troops. And I just believe that my education and experience puts me a notch above Tom, and that's why I'm running for sheriff.
Kevin McMahill there. Now, his opponent, as you just heard, is Tom Roberts, who also spent time in the legislature. Here's John's interview with him.
Simply put, what changes would you make if elected as sheriff from the Lombardo administration, or do you think things are moving at a reasonably good motion right now?
Well, look, crime is up. You know, basic all crime is up 5% this year. Homicides are up 60-something%. Vehicle theft up 33%. And I think that we need to stay focused, or my top priority would be making Las Vegas the safest community in America. And I would focus on the basics, right? Is our most vulnerable population, our seniors and children, and obviously our economic engine, the Strip and our tourist corridor.
So what's the solution to that? Frequently, I think a lot in law enforcement, even the sheriff has said, you know, the issue would come down to funding or manpower, resources, and so forth. If elected sheriff, what's the solution to the spike in murders, the spike in violent crime, a lot of these horrible things that we've been seeing in our community?
Well, I think it's a matter of changing the way we police, in that we involve the community and the folks that we do police more so. I think we do a decent job of it. I think we could do much better. I talked about our schools and our seniors is actually involving them in the policing process and telling us where we need to focus our attention on. I think it's leveraging public-private partnerships with the business community and actually putting cops where they need to be and putting them in our neighborhoods.
They do these the first Tuesdays, I think it is, where they go out into the different commands, and there's sort of events with the community. Are you referring to something more than that, something more robust than that in terms of community? And if so, how would it look potentially?
So, I mean, we have a ComStat process, which is we go over our crime statistics on a weekly basis. Actually, every morning there's a crime call. They go over crime that occurred in the last 24 hours. But I think you should open that up to the public, and you should have those meetings in your community so that you can get actual real-time feedback, not only from your police officers that patrol the streets, but the community that you serve.
one of the issues that was brought up in the legislative session in the past one, which you were at, dealing with investigation of use of force and involving the Attorney General's office in that. What is your position on that? Should Metro essentially investigate itself in the use of deadly force, or do you subscribe to the idea that an outside agency should be responsible for that?
Well, I believe, now look, I was part of that process over the last 5 or 6 years. I think we do a very good job of investigating our own use of force. I think it's important to have an outside entity that would be able to audit that or to take a look at that. I think we found several years ago when we added the Citizens Review Board for internal affairs cases that our level of investigations went up. Anytime you have somebody looking at those things, I think you do a much better job. And I don't believe that we at Metro would be afraid of that outside scrutiny, and I think we would welcome it.
What are the differences between yourself and Mr. McMahill?
Well, look, I think we both have a lot of experience. I've got over 10 years experience in executive staff. He's got some experience there. I think some of the fundamental differences are from an education standpoint. I have a master's degree. He doesn't. I have the highest level of post-certification that you can have in the state. He does not. I think our leadership style varies somewhat, and you'll see the differences as this campaign continues to roll out.
Well, tell me about your leadership style.
Look, I believe in collaboration and working with others. I believe in being approachable, not closed door. I think officers should be able to get to the 5th floor at Metro. Right now they can't. They have to make an appointment to get up there. I think the sheriff needs to be out in the public, and I think the sheriff needs to be out with the troops.
Now, both Roberts and McMahill had a lot to say about crime-fighting strategies as well. They had positive things to say about the overall direction at Metro. You can watch those full interviews on that and what their COVID policies would be for the department over on 8newsnow.com. Well, a government shutdown is looming. Up next, Alex Limon explains what budget reconciliation is. Right now, thousands of migrants, mostly from Haiti, are living under a bridge in Del Rio, Texas. At one point, there were as many as 15,000 people there. The Biden administration facing pressure from all sides over the deteriorating situation. Republicans complaining about Haitian migrants being released here into the U.S. Democrats, though, saying the conditions are just simply inhumane. Well, the federal government is now a week from a shutdown if Democrats and Republicans can't agree on a path forward to fund our government. Right now, the two sides sparring over a Democratic push to attach a debt ceiling hike to that $3.5 trillion spending plan. Republicans are refusing to support that effort.
If they want to tax, borrow, and spend historic sums of money without our input, they'll have to raise the debt limit without our help.
I didn't want to vote for it when Trump was president, but I did because my obligation is to pay our bills so that we can make veterans VA benefit payments, so we can make Social Security payments.
Now, the House already passed a bill to fund the government and raise the debt ceiling, but Democrats need at least 10 Republicans to pass the plan over in the Senate unless they manage to use what is called budget reconciliation. John Langler talked with our Washington, D.C. correspondent, Alexandra Limon, to explain exactly what that means.
Democrats are hoping to pass that $3.5 trillion spending plan using budget reconciliation. It's a term we've heard a lot about lately, but it's pretty technical. Alex Limon joining us from Washington to talk about it and what this budget reconciliation, what it really is. Alex?
Hey there. Well, budget reconciliation is a process by which lawmakers try to pass a budget, to put it simply. Now, in the U.S. House, lawmakers always only need a simple majority in order to pass a piece of legislation. But that is not the case in the Senate because of the filibuster. Senators need to have 60 senators support a piece of legislation in order to pass it. The budget reconciliation, however, provides an exemption to that rule. Any bill that or any package that is passed under this process of budget reconciliation can be passed with only a simple majority. And that is why both parties really try to use that process when they can to try to pass major pieces of legislation. Republicans, for example, use that process to pass their tax cuts, which also provided, big tax cuts to corporations. They slapped slashed the corporate tax rate. And now Democrats are trying to do the same thing, trying to approve their spending plan, $3.5 trillion that would invest in things like free preschool, community college, and also make big investments in green energy to try to fight climate change. They too are trying to pass it under budget reconciliation, which again would only require a simple majority in the Senate.
So Alex, again, as you said, it's a technical situation there in Capitol Hill. It's a technical process, only requires that simple majority. The Democrats, there's a big push to get it done, but they still haven't gotten it done. Where do things stand right now with getting this all approved and pushing it through?
Yeah, although Democrats have the majority in the Senate, they've still not been able to reach an agreement within their own party in order to actually get that done and get that budget reconciliation package passed. And that's because there's some disagreement, some pretty big disagreement between the more progressive members of the caucus and then the more moderate members of the caucus, like Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, for example, who don't agree with various different things. The large price tag of it, for example, $3.5 trillion. But also some of the other measures, West Virginia obviously being a big coal country area. So Joe Manchin perhaps pushing back on some of those green energy initiatives and what that would do for the coal industry in his state. So we're seeing a lot of disagreement. And so far, Democrats have just had trouble getting all of the members of their own party in the Senate to agree.
And that was Alex Limon from Washington. Marking 4 years since 1 October. In What to Watch tonight, there will be a remembrance over at the Healing Garden. We will be covering that on 1 October all day long here at Channel 8. And as Alex just mentioned, the budget runs out Tuesday. We are waiting to see some kind of continuing resolution if that passes, or if we will have yet another government shutdown next week. Thanks for watching Politics Now. You can stay up to date online anytime and watch us here every Saturday night. Have a great night.